Hey guys, it's Alec Torelli, and welcome back to an episode of The Hand of the Day, brought to you from the Grand Hyatt in Bangkok. This place is beautiful here at the lounge, and I'm bringing you an awesome hand of poker.
Hand of the Day.
This one comes from the $1 million cash game between two of the biggest legends in the game, Phil Ivey and Patrik Antonius. Hand kicks off 501,000 blinds, Ivey in the cutoff. Stuck a lot in the game, but he just won a pot, makes it 3,500 with two jacks. Now, Antonius on the button just calls ace-10 offsuit, and Brian Townsend in the small blind calls as well with two eights. We go three ways to the flop. Pre-flop so far is totally standard. Ivey opening, Antonius could opt to 3-bet here on the button, maybe just call as well, but his hand is definitely too strong to fold. Now, Townsend in the small blind, I think, has a very clear call. You don't really want to be 3-betting out of position with something like eights. Doesn't play incredibly well post-flop. You also don't want to get 4-bet, and you definitely don't mind playing a multi-way pot, because if you hit a set, your hand plays great. If you don't, you can usually just get away from it. I like how all three players played the hand. Let's go three ways to the flop. Flop comes ace-ace-jack with two clubs. Now, Ivey and Patrik both flop pretty huge hands. Ivey decides to bet out 6,000 into 12, about half the pot, and Antonius now makes it 50,000. Folds around to Ivey, who goes and makes it 50,000, and Antonius just calls. So here on the flop, Ivey betting out 6,000. I really like this bet. Half-size pot bet gives him a good price on his bluffs, and his range in this spot is definitely the strongest. He's the only one that could have ace-queen and ace-king because he raised pre-flop. If either Antonius or Townsend had ace-queen or ace-king, they probably would have 3-bet themselves. So Ivey's range is definitely the strongest here. He can also have jacks full, whereas the other players can't. So I like a bet from Ivey, both with his hand and because his range is the strongest. He could definitely mix in some bluffs as well on this board, like king 10, queen 10, and flush draws, and have a very balanced range with the lead in the hand. Now on to Antonius, who has another tough decision. Of course, he's never going to fold, but he has a tough choice between calling and raising. The merits for raising are, this is one of the better hands he can have, and it's likely very, very likely he has the best hand. The problem with raising here is twofold. One, when he raises, what does that do to his calling range? It makes his calling range very, very weak. The other problem is that Ivey's range is still stronger than Patrik's, and if you open it up to getting 3-bet on the flop, you put yourself in a very tough spot. I guess the third reason I don't really love raising here is when you call this flop, your hand looks pretty weak. You allow yourself to call with some floats, some straight draws, some flush draws, maybe a weak jack, maybe even something like 2 7s, and you give Ivey the rope to keep barreling with his bluffs on the turn. Raising takes away all those plays, so for that reason, I would prefer if Patrik just called the flop. Townsend, of course, gets out of the way. Back over to Ivey, who I think has a 3-bet here on this board. He doesn't have the absolute nuts, but with jacks, it's an amazing hand to 3-bet the flop with because you don't block any of the aces your opponent could have. So if Antonius is raising the flop with something like ace-queen, ace-10, ace-x, any ace combo, you don't block any of those, and when you 3-bet here, he's always going to continue because 3 aces, is sort of pigeonholed now. It's just too strong to fold. The one downside for raising is if Patrik is bluffing, you take away the bluff and force him to fold. But I still like raising with this hand. It's good to mix in this with some bluffs, and I think Ivey has a good raise on the flop. 50,000, also a great size. Back over to Patrik, ace-10, very clear call here. He could be ahead of some of the time, has to call, can't really raise, can't really fold. We go heads up to the turn. Turn is a 5 of diamonds where things get pretty interesting. Here, the pot's 107,000 and Ivey bets out 100,000, very close to the size of the pot. So in this spot, his range becomes a lot more polarized. He either has bluffs or very, very strong hands. Of course, that's pretty much his range on the flop, but when he bets the pot on the turn, he's saying that even more. So I wouldn't say it's possible he has any ace-x combos. It's just too loose to play those hands this way. Those are all just gonna call the flop or not bet so big on the turn. So when he plays the hand this way, he really is saying, I either have, some sort of straight draw, flush draw combo, like maybe queen 10 of clubs, or he has 3 aces or a boat that he's going for value with. And that means ace-queen, ace-king, ace-jack, jacks full, or maybe some bluffs. Now over to Antonius, who has a tough hand to play. He's facing a pot-sized bet, and there aren't that many bluffs that Ivey could have. Now, when Antonius also has a 10 in his hand, and the 10 of clubs, he blocks some of the bluffs that Ivey can have. Ivey can no longer have king 10 and queen 10 of clubs, or any 10 with a flush draw, which are definitely a lot of the combos of bluffs that Ivey's going to have. That being said, ace 10 is still a very strong hand, and if he is up against something like ace queen or jacks full, he still does have some equity. He can either chop or boat up to make the best hand. So because of that, and the chance that on the offset chances Ivey's still bluffing, I would call the turn, reevaluate on the river, probably planning on folding. Patrik goes ahead and calls. We go heads up to the river in a $330,000 pot. The river comes in offsuit queen, and Ivey here has a tough decision. If he bets, his hand looks so strong. He's really never going to take this line with a bluff, and there's just frankly not that many bluffs he can have. I mean, maybe he can be bluffing with like Jack X and turn it into a bluff, but that just seems unlikely. And also, I mean, I guess he could have like a low flush draw, like 7-6 of clubs, but that just seems way too loose. So there aren't that many bluffs that Ivey could have in the first place, and frankly, bluffing here is pretty damn risky because it's so likely that Antonius has a monster. He called the flop, re-raised the flop, called the 3-bet, and then called a bet on pot-sized bet on the turn. So bluffing here would be pretty suicidal from Ivey, but at the same time, if he checks, it's unlikely that Antonius is going to bet just because there's not that many draws in Antonius's range. When Antonius calls a pot-sized bet on the turn with 1 to go, he doesn't have that many draws, so his most likely hand is something like an ace. So I would probably bet this river here if I'm Ivey, just because I don't really ever expect to get bluff raised. I don't expect my opponent to ever bet a worse hand if I check, so the only way to get value from my hand is to bet and hope that he thinks I'm bluffing. Ivey decides to bet $225,000, which I think is a really good size bet. It's about 2/3 the size of the pot, so I think it's good because it gives your opponent a little bit of leeway to call. If he went all in here, I think it might look a little bit too strong, so I like betting somewhere between 175 and 225. Now on to Antonius, who I think could get away from this hand on the river. I'm trying not to be results oriented and just say that because I could see the cards, but if you really think this hand through, I mean, what hands does Antonius beat? Specifically with the 10 of clubs in the hand, he blocks a lot of Ivey's bluffs, and Ivey could still have ace jack, ace queen, ace king, jacks full, and there just aren't that many bluffs. I think I would let this one go and call the river with ace queen, ace jack, ace 5, and that's pretty much it. I just don't think Ivey is bluffing often enough that you really have to defend this river with a lot more hands than that. Anyway, maybe Antonius saw something I didn't, I don't know, but he ended up calling and losing $800,000 pot to Phil Ivey. That's it for the hand of the day. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and please leave me your thoughts in a comment below. How would you have played this hand if you're Phil? Would you have called the river if you're Patrik? Definitely leave me your thoughts in a comment and let me know. I will see you in there. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys next time from the hand of the day.